Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama Hare
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our morning Bhagavatam class this morning on the auspicious day of the appearance of Advaitacharya. We will be discussing Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, verse 26, the chapter entitled The Passing of Bhishmadev in the Presence of Lord Krishna. Such a extra auspicious day to learn such a powerful verse. And we have Dronacharya from ISKCON, Philadelphia. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glory to Gurudev and Prabhupada.
Please accept my humble obeisances. Jai Gurudev, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripa
Sindhuvescha, Patitanam, Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. And it's all yours, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you. All glories to Advaitacharya, as you mentioned, one of the principal associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is Advaitacharya Prabhu who had called for the Lord to descend, seeing that the age was getting worse and worse, and that the Lord had to come himself to help deliver the fallen souls. Of course, Advaitacharya is a direct expansion of the Supreme Lord. He is an incarnation of Mahavishnu. And so he's all part of Mahaprabhu's pastimes and Mahaprabhu's descent. But it is because of him in the pastime that the Lord was compelled to come. And as a result, he brought love of God from the spiritual world in the form of the Sankirtan movement, which we are all participants of today. So on this day, we pray to Advaitacharya for his mercy. And in the same way that Dronacharya had prayed that the Lord descend here on earth to clear out all the inauspicious elements of this world and bring in the presence of Krishna. We also pray that to Dronacharya to help us remove all these elements within our own hearts. We pray that the Lord descends and comes into our hearts and cleanses us as we chant the holy name and as we serve Krishna in our lives. Dronacharya Prabhu ki jai. So we're going to get right into the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a very long verse today. So we're going to do a lot of reading, but very, very informative here. Srimad Bhagavatam 1:9-26, the passing away of Grandfather Bhishma from the bed of arrows. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirajit. Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest in this age, I should first offer one's respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human beings, unto the goddess of learning, Mother Saraswati, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart becomes almost completely destroyed. In devotional service to the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Today's verse, Purusha swabhava vihitan yata varnam yata shramam vairagyam ragopadhibhyam amnatu bayalakshanan. Purusha, human being, swabhava, by his own acquired qualities. Vihitan, prescribed. Yata, according to. Varnam, classification of caste. Yata, according to. Ashramam, orders of life. Vairagya, detachment. Raga, attachment. Upadibhyam, out of such designations. Nata, systematically. Ubaya, both. Lakshanan, symptoms. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. At Maharaj Yudhisthira's inquiry, Bhishma Dev first defined all the classifications of castes and orders of life in terms of the individual's qualifications. Then he systematically, in twofold divisions, described counteraction by detachment and interaction by attachment. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The conception of 4 castes and 4 orders of life, as planned by the Lord himself, Bhagavad Gita 4:13, is to accelerate transcendental qualities of the individual person so that he may gradually realize his spiritual identity and thus act accordingly to get free from material bondage or conditional life. In almost all of the Puranas, the subject matter is described in the same spirit. And also in the Mahabharata, it is more elaborately described by Bhishma Dev in the Shanti Parva, beginning from the 60th chapter. The Varnashram Dharma is prescribed for the civilized human being, just to train him to successfully terminate human life. Self-realization is distinguished from the life of lower animals engaged in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. Bhishmadev advised for all human beings 9 qualifications. Not to become angry. 2, not to lie. 3, equally distribute wealth. 4, to forgive. 5, to beget children only with one's legitimate wife. 6, to be pure in the mind and hygienic in body. 7, not to be inimical toward anyone. 8, to be simple. And 9, to support servants or subordinates. One cannot be called a civilized person without acquiring the above-mentioned preliminary qualities. Besides these, the brahmanas, the intelligent men, the administrative class, the mercantile community, and the laborer class must acquire special qualities in terms of the occupational duties mentioned in the Vedic scriptures. For the intelligent men, controlling the senses is the most essential qualification. It is the basis of morality. Sex indulgence, even with a legitimate wife, must also be controlled. And thereby, family control will automatically follow. An intelligent man abuses his great qualifications if he does not follow the Vedic way of life. This means that he must seriously make the study of Vedic literatures, especially of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. For learning Vedic knowledge, one must approach a person who is 100% engaged in devotional service. He must not do things which are forbidden in the Shastras. A person cannot be a teacher if he drinks or smokes. In the modern system of education, the teacher's academic qualification is taken into consideration without evaluation of his moral life. Therefore, the result of education is misuse of high intelligence in so many ways. That could be just we could end it right there, and that could be a class in and of itself. But Srila Prabhupada goes on and gives us more information. The Kshatriyas, the members of the administrative class, is especially advised to give charity and not to accept charity in any circumstances. Modern administrators raise subscriptions for some political functions, but never give charity to the citizens in any state function. It is just the reverse in the injunctions of the Shastras. The administrative class must be well versed in the Shastras, but must take to the profession, the administrative class must be well versed in the Shastras, but must not take to the profession of teachers. The administrators should never pretend to become nonviolent and thereby go to hell. When Arjuna wanted to become a nonviolent coward on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he was severely chastised by Lord Krishna. The Lord degraded Arjuna at that time to the status of an uncivilized man for his avowed acceptance of the cult of nonviolence. The administrative class must be personally trained in military education. Cowards should not be elevated to the presidential throne by dint of numerical votes only. The monarchs were all chivalrous personalities, and therefore monarchies should be maintained, provided that the monarch is regularly trained in the occupational duties of a king. In fighting, the king or the president should never return home without being hurt by the enemy. The so-called king today never visits the warfield. He is very much expert in artificially encouraging the fighting strength in the hope of false national prestige. As soon as the administrative class is turned into a gang of mercantile or laborer men, the whole machinery of government becomes polluted. Haribol. Again, that's a class in and of itself. Srila Prabhupada has given us so much nectar here. The Vaishyas, the mercantile members, the members of the mercantile communities, are especially advised to protect the cows. Cow protection means increasing the milk productions, namely the curd and butter. Agriculture and distribution of foodstuffs are the primary duties of the mercantile community, backed by education in Vedic knowledge and training to give in charity. As the Kshatriyas were given charge of the protection of citizens, Vaishyas were also in charge of the protection of animals. Animals are never meant to be killed. Killing of animals is a symptom of a barbarian society. For a human being, agricultural produce, fruits, and milk are sufficient and compatible foodstuffs. The human society should give more attention to animal protection. The productive energy of the laborer is misused when he is occupied by industrial enterprises. Industry of various types cannot produce the essential needs of man, namely rice, wheat, grains, milk, fruits, and vegetables. The production of machines and machine tools increase the artificial living fashion of a class of vested interest and keeps thousands of men in starvation and unrest. This should not be the standard of civilization. The Sudra class is less intelligent and should have no independence. They are meant for rendering sincere service to the three higher sections of society. The Sudra class can attain all comforts of life simply by rendering service to the higher classes. It is especially enjoined that a Sudra should never bank money. As soon as a Sudra accumulates wealth, it will be misused for sinful activities in wine, women, and gambling. Wine, women, and gambling indicate that the population is degraded to less than Sudra quality. The higher castes should always look after the maintenance of Sudras, and they should provide them with old and used garments. A Sudra should not leave his master when his master is old and invalid, and a master should keep the servant satisfied in all respects. The Sudras must first of all be satisfied with sumptuous food and clothing before any sacrifice is performed. In this age, so many functions are held by spending millions, but the poor laborer is not sumptuously fed or given charity, clothes, etc. The laborers are thus dissatisfied, and so they make agitation. The Varnas are, so to speak, classifications of different occupations, and ashram dharma is the gradual progress on the path of self-realization. Both are interrelated, and one is dependent on the other. The main purpose of ashram dharma is to awaken knowledge and detachment. The brahmacharya ashram is the training ground for prospective candidates. In this ashram, it is instructed that the material world is not actually the home of the living being. The conditioned souls under material bondage are prisoners of matter, and therefore self-realization is the ultimate aim of life. The whole system of ashram dharma is a means to detachment. One who fails to assimilate this spirit of detachment is allowed to enter into family life with the same spirit of detachment. Therefore, one who attains detachment may at once adopt the fourth order, namely renounced. and thus live on charity only, not to accumulate wealth, but just to keep body and soul together for ultimate realization. Household life is one who is attached, and the Vanaprastha and Sannyasa orders are for those who are detached from material life. The Brahmachari ashram is especially meant for training both the attached and detached. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Really just, this purport was really full of nectar. And in the spiritual way, describes this Varnashram system, which we'll discuss a little bit about. Om Agena Timbarandasha Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umletam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Swapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasili Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The verse again today. At Maharaj Yudhisthira's inquiry, Bhishmadev first defined all the classifications of castes and orders of life in terms of the individual's qualifications. Then he systematically, in twofold divisions, described counteraction by detachment and interaction by attachment. So just as Bhishmadev defined all the classifications in caste and orders of life in terms of individuals' qualifications, Srila Prabhupada is also in this purport very systematically define these classifications of the orders of life. And in doing so, he also very expertly unified how important it is that these castes, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra, which over time, because they've been separated from the ashram dharma, have become very polluted. The caste system, has been manipulated over time and has been used to control people, and therefore it's very much frowned down upon. In fact, it's for many, has been completely abandoned in India because it's been used to exploit and put down people for such a long time. But Srila Prabhupada has also said that this actually is very natural. So this is the natural order of life. The verse that, but it has to be used in the appropriate way. In other words, it's not the end all be all, but it also has to be utilized properly. The verse that was being quoted here from the 4th chapter, 13th verse of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna that according to the 3 modes of material nature and all the work associated with them, the 4 divisions of human society are created by me. And although I'm the creator of this system, you should know that I'm yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So these 4 orders of life, it's actually 8 orders of life, the 4 that are social orders, and then the 4 different ashrams or statuses of living that a person is in or could be in. These are created by Lord Krishna. In one conversation that Srila Prabhupada had with a Russian professor who was who was kind of propagating communism, and basically which brings it down to the administrative class and the working class. Srila Prabhupada said you can divide it up into any way you want, but ultimately these four orders, or the propensities that are there in life according to the modes of material nature that a person acquires, is going to be inherent within the living, or within the conditioned soul. So you can't avoid it. It's going to be there. And that is because the modes of material nature, as they influence the conditioned soul, whether one is in goodness, and goodness is associated with one that is in the Brahminical mindset, passion of those that are in the Kshatriya or warrior-like administrative tendency. Those that are Vaishyas are covered over by both passion as well as the mode of ignorance, and those that are Sudras are primarily in the mode of ignorance. So you're always going to have these influences that are working on people in society. So you can classify it and say we're going to stay within these two categories, but ultimately, because Krishna's created these three modes of material nature, people are going to be attracted to one particular mode based upon their previous karma, then this is actually what it's going to ultimately play out, even if we try to suppress it. Now, the danger comes when one says, okay, you're in a particular mode, so therefore this is your spiritual qualification, where only people that are Brahmins, they have they lose their sense of duty, which is to instruct, cultivate, nurture those that are in the other orders of life. And then they begin to think that they become very proud of their accomplishment. Everything must come through me. They start collecting wealth and not distributing that wealth. All different types of manipulation. And then also that one is that simply by birth one is qualified. That is the other pollution that enters into the divisions of human society, that one thinks because of one's birth one is a Brahmin. And we find this specifically in the last or 2 chapters ago with the interaction with Ashvatthama, who was the son of Dronacharya. And Dronacharya was born as a Brahmin, and then took on the nature of a Kshatriya for particular reasons. But Ashvatthama, who acted outside of his caste, and did very degraded activities, such as trying to, he shot the Brahmastra, trying to kill, Maharaj Parikshit inside the womb. So he was referred to as Brahman Bandhu, the son of a Brahmin. He wasn't referred to as a Brahmin, he was just the son of a Brahmin. But yet the pollution in life becomes that, okay, I have a son, I have children, they become what I become. And we all know that this isn't true. I could be a lawyer just because I have a child or a daughter or a son. They don't automatically become a lawyer. I could be an engineer or a doctor. If you're a doctor, you're going to operate on me. You can't say, well, my son's going to do it because he just inherited my qualities. And so there has to be adequate training. There has to be proper training and engagement. Now, from a spiritual perspective, the ashram system has to be there, because that brings the element of detachment. So it's not simply just a focus on work. It's just not activity and work. It's actually a spiritual development that ultimately comes to the point of detachment from this material world. So why is Krishna put in this system into play? He says, to elevate men from the animal status of life. The above-mentioned divisions are created by the Lord for the systematic development of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the ultimate goal of the Varnashram system. Failure to bring one to the point of understanding and serving Lord Krishna you fall short of the Varnashram system. So one could say, why just not give everybody bhakti? Why not just get everybody to, chant Hare Krishna and just spread the teachings of pure bhakti? Well, that is great for those that will take to it, and we'll understand in just a minute that a Vaishnava is actually above, just as Lord Krishna is above these orders of life. The pure Vaishnava is also above these orders of life. But what we find in human society is that there's a strong disinterest for spiritual life. And that one may be interested in some religious life, but only in terms of accumulating their own wealth, being able to enjoy a life. And then ultimately, when one becomes frustrated with that life, one tries to renounce. So Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, that is the primary focus of, and really it's really in that Artha and Kama, which people are attracted to. So people go through their whole life and they use this term, I'm trying to find my calling. I'm trying to find what I'm supposed to do in life, what really makes me happy. And we hear people talk about that, I'm a misplaced soul because, I'm doing this, but I really should be doing that. I'm really an artist, but yet I'm having to do this activity. They never really connect with their nature. So therefore they spend their whole entire life just kind of out of place. And when you're out of place, you can never really truly be focused. So by being properly directed in your activities, it can allow one to actually settle down and begin to refocus one's life actually on the true purpose of life. But without that, you become just kind of scatterbrained. Vyavisatmika buddhi. Krishna talks about this one-pointed intelligence, which is necessary for one to advance in spiritual life. But just in general, this, if one's desires are just scattered all over the place, and one is just attached to trying to find one's mission in life or purpose in life, just on the material platform, one will never be able to steady oneself and engage in the higher purpose of life, which is self-realization. So I'm going to take a look real quick at the 18th verse of the Bhagavad Gita, which describes this in a lot of detail. The 11th verse of the 18th chapter, Krishna says, "It is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities." So all conditioned souls, we have to work. And Krishna also talks about this in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that everybody has to do some activity in life. But whimsical activity paves the path to life of spiritual emptiness. And therefore, the Vedic way describes performing activities with knowledge and sacrifice that will lead to renunciation of the results of one's actions. Now, not renouncing activity. So let me step back here. What Krishna is telling us is that renunciation of an activity is not what he recommends, because everyone has to act in some way. But what he describes is that one has to begin to renounce the results of one's activity. And by proper engagement in your varna, one can then begin to understand that we have to begin to renounce the results of our activities. Prescribed duties, Krishna tells in the 18th chapter, should never be renounced. He says sacrifice, austerity, and prescribed duties. All these things should never be renounced. He says, all these activities should be performed without attachment or expectation of the results. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pritha. And that is my final opinion. So here again, we see that along with performing prescribed duties, there's some element of spirituality that is involved. Without it, it becomes just a polluted system of material engagement. So properly directing society in a way which they are engaged according to their propensities, and we'll get to that in just a second, can bring about a peaceful situation within the lives of individuals and into society as a whole. Now, renunciation of duty. This goes back to Krishna and Arjuna's conversation in the Bhagavad Gita. So a person can renounce for discomfort. We could be in an uncomfortable situation and become renounced. Or we can abandon our prescribed duty and try to seek higher pleasures. This is considered to be renunciation in the mode of passion. And this does not lead to self-realization and attachment, but it actually leads to more and more attachment. So if you remember in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna first said, if I perform my prescribed duty, I'm actually going to create a very horrible situation. In fact, I'm going to incur sin because I'm going to be killing people that are my loved ones, and society will become ruined. And then Krishna then turns around, he answers Arjuna's question and says, actually, if you don't perform your prescribed duty, you will be considered to be sinful. Because the nature that you are as a Kshatriya, one, you personally will never be happy if you walk away from the battlefield. Your conscience will always haunt you because you'll always be thinking, I walked away from what I should have actually done. He's found his calling, but yet he's not executing his calling. And then Krishna tells him that, people are going to speak of you in very unkind words. And that will be intolerable for you. And for a person who executes his prescribed duties, what is their destination? He says, you're guaranteed to go to the heavenly planets at a very minimum. He said, so there really is no loss. What happens is, in Arjuna's case, is that we're always faced with this dilemma that things aren't always easy. And discomfort and uncomfortable situations always arise within our lives. And the teaching of Dharma teaches you that regardless of whether it's a situation that's comfortable or a situation that is very, very pleasing, we have to remain even throughout. And therefore, you have the verse in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which says that the appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course, they arise like the winter and summer seasons, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about how in the winter time it's very difficult because as we're experiencing now, you don't want to go outside. It's but you have to do it. If a person has to take a bath in the morning, well, it's cold. You don't want to take a bath. I mean, now we're inside houses, but imagine if you had to take a bath outside, how we'd feel. But you have to do it as a matter of duty. In the summertime, you don't feel like cooking because it's so hot out, but yet you have to do it as a matter of duty. So remaining focused and being able to tolerate the comforts and discomforts of this world and not becoming distracted by them is, this is all encouraged when one is properly situated in one's particular dharma. So if you become more and more attached to one's duties as opposed to detached, Krishna tells us in the 18th chapter, 12th verse, he says, for one who is not renounced, the threefold fruits of action, desirable, undesirable, and mixed, they accrue after death. But those who are in the renounced order of life, they have no such results to suffer and enjoy. So along this path, as one begins the process of detachment, if one renounces the results of one's action, then you don't have any results to enjoy or to suffer. But if one simply just works without the understanding or the spirit of detachment, then one has to suffer the results of their activities, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Now, also described in the 18th chapter, as expertly also explained in the purport, is the particular qualities that one has in material nature. So again, this is set forth by the Supreme Lord himself. And if you take people and you just kind of let them be, you can actually see that people have acquired particular types of natures. It's said that, you can let children and young adults, if you just let them be in an arena, they will naturally begin to gather in certain ways. For instance, there'll be some people that are natural leaders, and they'll start gathering people and say, okay, let's come together. You do this, we're going to set up teams, even kids, we're going to start playing. So right away there'll be people that begin to say, okay, I'm going to assemble the team. I'm going to be the captain. I'm going to do this. And then you'll have other people that you can tell that they're just naturally money-minded. They'll be the ones that set up a little store, a little shop, and start selling things and taking care. And then you'll just be those that just want to help and assist. And then you'll be those that are kind of like the protectors, that have that kind of fiery personality that want to bring about a peaceful situation, and will have to use violence, even if necessary, to help bring about a peaceful situation. So Krishna explains, he says, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras are all distinguished by the qualities born of their own natures in accordance with the material modes. So it's not born of their, simply parentage, but is born of the material modes of nature which they have acquired. Peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are all natural qualities in which Brahmanas work. Heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership are the natural qualities for the Kshatriya. Srila Prabhupada very nicely explains that we really don't see this quality of Kshatriya much anymore. In fact, we see that politicians, for the most part, they're willing to start wars, but they're actually not willing to fight themselves. So they sit back in their air-conditioned office, and start telling people, okay, we're going to send another 100,000 people over to this country, and they're going to fight. And then what should we do? Okay, it's like they move like pieces on a board. They play with people's lives like it doesn't matter. They're not affected by it. And then they get on TV and say, oh, this is the hardest day of my life, having to send people and see people come home. But they're simply just manipulating, the lives of people. There was this, as Srila Prabhupada writes in here, he says that, a person should a king should not come back from battle unharmed. There's a saying that the Spartans used to have. They would say that their wives would tell their husbands, come back with your sword, or on your sword, or no, come back with your shield or on your shield. Basically, like, you cannot cower away, and don't come back without your shield. So basically, your shield is what protects you in battle. So either you're going to come back laying on your shield, you're going to be dead and we'll bury you with honor, or you're going to come back with your shield carrying it, and that means you were victorious in battle. But don't come back, you dropped your shield in battle and ran in disgrace. Going on with the Vaishyas, farming, cow protection, and business are all the natural work for Vaishyas. And for the Sudras, there are labor and service to others. Now, here's the important point, because Krishna says, by following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. This is very important because there's going to be a leap, or there's going to be the interjection of what is the missing element? Because simply just performing material activities, how can one become perfect? Because material activities really just will continue to lead one to further karma, which will generate a desire to perform more activities. And that is the cycle of repeated birth and death. And this is the missing element. And Krishna clearly just defines it here. But this is the missing element in the Varnashram system, and why it becomes polluted. Because Krishna says, now please hear from me how this can be done. Text 46. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. So in whatever occupation one may be engaged, if he serves the Supreme Lord, he can achieve the highest perfection. These are Krishna's words. So the interjection of devotional service will elevate one in any particular mode of life to the point of self-realization. Krishna also talks about that. That it doesn't matter whether one is a Brahmin, a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Sudra. He says that devotional service is so powerful that it can elevate one to the point of being a devotee. Now, why is that? Why? Because Krishna is transcendental to the modes of material nature. And this system that Krishna puts in place is really only to bring one gradually, systematically, to the point of detachment from this world. Detachment from this world for what reason? So that we can attach ourselves and understand who we really are, attach ourselves to Krishna. The Brahmanas, they're supposed to actually be teaching this science, and thus they're known as Brahmanas, ones who know Brahman, the absolute truth. Now, most of the time, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport to 413 of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, this understanding, however, is impersonal for the most part. There are three aspects of the absolute truth. Brahmameti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavad-iti Sabhyate. That they're all aspects, but there are three aspects. The impersonal realization describes the Supreme Lord in very generic terms, but doesn't actually define the personality of God. So therefore, a Vaishnava is to consider to be higher than a Brahmana because they know the basis of Brahman. We find a verse in the 14th chapter, the 27th verse of the 14th chapter. It says that a man who transcends the limited knowledge of that is not the verse. I clicked on the wrong thing here. But it basically says that the one who knows is the basis of Brahman. The basis of Brahman is Krishna. So that is the conclusion of what a Vaishnava is. That they understand that the basis of, I'm sorry, I relocated my notes here. So I got caught right here for a second. So just let me backtrack for a second. So the point is that a Brahmana knows Brahman. That Brahman realization may be impersonal. But a Vaishnava renders devotional service and understands the personality of Krishna. And that is Krishna. And one who acts in that relationship is Krishna consciousness, is Krishna conscious. So therefore, we see that a Vaishnava who is serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to the system that is brought about by the modes of material nature, can thus transcend the modes of material nature. So then Krishna tells us that he's transcendental to this system. And he also informs that those who follow this system can also become transcendental to it. And even though they're transcendental, they still have to act. Just like Krishna says, I have to act. But how do they act? They act with the spirit of detachment. That detachment can come when one is connected in service to the Supreme Lord. And with that mentality of detachment, what are the qualities that they experience? They don't hate or envy. They don't overly rejoice or become proud. Why? Because they execute their service out of ultimate duty to the Supreme Lord. And thus they do not become attached. Now, I want to go back to the purport, a couple things just to touch on. And again, you cannot separate out the system of quality of work that one is doing from the aspect of spiritual realization and not have it be complete. His principles, and that's why he lines out 9 qualifications: not to become angry, not to lie, equally distribute wealth, to forgive, to beget children only by one's legitimate wife, be pure in mind, through devotional service and chanting the Lord's names, hygienic in body, to keep oneself clean, not to become inimical towards anyone, to be simple, to support servants, to support people. These are the qualities that accompany, and are taught through one's line of, through one's line of work. It's simply just not engaging in your job, come home, and that is it. There has to be the spiritual element that is incorporated. The misuse of funds. I was looking up how the Srila Prabhupada writes here that the exploitation of money by politicians simply just to bring about their own election just to try to get votes. Just in 2020, the presidential election, $14.4 billion, not million, $billion was spent just to get somebody elected as a president. You can imagine the level of resources that are meant, or that could be redistributed to actually help society. Not one of those dollars went to actually helping a person, other than one person get elected and put in office. Unbelievable. Srila Prabhupada talks about educators and how educators, they need to be qualified, not simply just on intellectual capacity, but on the way that they live their lives. Because it's simply just not about getting education so you can get a degree, and the degree will lead you to a job, and that job will be able to allow you to earn money to be able to enjoy life. If that is the case, then it's really not going to lead one to self-realization. It'll lead oneself to greater detachment and greater attachment in this world. The goal of the Varnashram system is to bring oneself to Krishna, which requires detachment from this material world. So I hope that this idea, this principle is clear, that the Varnashram system coming from Krishna, it cannot be separated in any way with the spiritual qualities that are necessary. And embedded in the system is acts of sacrifice, acts of knowledge, gaining knowledge and understanding, which leads one to the higher purposes of life. This is taught, at the early stage of one being a brahmachari, at student life. This is taught from a very early age. And then as one goes on into married life, they're actually going with a foundation and a basis, not simply just to enjoy life, but to actually live a responsible life and a life dedicated towards self-realization. For a man to help deliver his wife, and for the wife to help deliver the children. Live in a very regulated way, which honors people, which supports people, which brings society together instead of separating them over trying to control wealth. So all these elements are there, but you can't separate out the principle of caste with spiritual development, or else it'll simply become polluted and completely on the material platform, and will not elevate one to the ultimate goal of life. And furthermore, a Vaishnava, one who is seeking the service of the Lord, one who has dedicated one's life to engaging in that service. We should not think to be on the platform of a person who is engaged in these particular duties, or reliant on performing these duties in order to elevate oneself in life. Nor should we ever think that if a person who is performing devotional service has certain characteristics, where they are, say, an administrator, or they are a Vaishya, or they are a Sudra, they're performing that type of work, that work is not actually considered to be a Sudra work, or a Vaishya work, or Kshatriya work. It is actually to be considered transcendental work. And those people, Lord Chaitanya explains that Kiva Vipra Kiva Nasi Sudra Kena Nai Ye Krishna Tattva Veda Se Guru Hai. That if one is a Sudra, one is a sannyasi, one is a Vanaprast, one is whatever status of life one is. If one knows the science of Krishna, he is qualified to become guru and can actually deliver anyone. That is the power of devotional service and why devotional service is transcendental to any of these particular modes. I'll stop there. Thank you for your kind attention and listening. And if we do have any questions, I realize now it's 9:06. There's a long purport, and I tried to cover certain topics. Hopefully I went over a little bit, and I apologize.
No problem at all, Dronacharya. Like you say, it was long purport filled with nectar and packed knowledge. So thank you so much for such an amazing class, and really bringing it all together. And I like how you said that the purpose of Varnashram Dharma is to make us more Krishna conscious. So that was a very nice way of how you pulled everything together so nicely. So thank you so much for touching on some main points. I would like to ask devotees, I know we passed the hour, just want to give 5 minutes or so if devotees have any questions and, any clarification, any points to share. Please do jump right in and ask a question. If you have anything, I'm just going to go down the list here to see if there's any points. Hands up. There's a point that you mentioned, Dronacharya, and I want to ask if you could shed some light on it. And I really like how you said it. Renounce the activity versus renouncing the activity versus renouncing the results of the activities. And unfortunately, in human nature, we always ignore the first, and we are so attached to the results. How can we develop that mood or the understanding that, it's not so much of renouncing the activity, which we should stick with, but the results, because when something don't go well, we just say, okay, I'm just going to give up. Because they're so attached to the results of it, because they want something out of it for some benefit that may not be what Krishna wants.
Right. Yeah, and it's a very big lesson in the Bhagavad Gita. It's not the primary lesson. The primary lesson is to surrender to Krishna. And through surrendering to Krishna, everything else actually falls into place. But one of the most popular themes of the Bhagavad Gita that's accepted by everyone outside of the devotional community is this idea of performing one's dharma and not necessarily chasing after, satisfaction elsewhere and abandoning your dharma. So Arjuna was chastised by Krishna, and he basically said, you've lost all your good qualities because, you were an Aryan, which is a person who knows the value of life. And basically, you've forgotten the value of life because you're now wanting to chase after another dharma because you think that'll make you happy. And in doing so, he's basically explaining to him that you have to perform your duty, either whether it makes you happy or sad, because the results of those activities, because you're considering yourself wanting to enjoy the results of those activities. That is what's actually making you feel that way. So it's not the activity that you should renounce. It's actually learning to renounce the results of your activities. How do we renounce the results of our activities? One is to understand that we're not the doers, ultimately, that there's other factors of action. We're compelled to act in certain ways. The other is that by seeing that everything has a part in Krishna's plan and trying to understand that, Krishna, how are you using this situation to help me better understand my relationship with you? Because it's inevitable. We're never going to have that everything falls into place. So when things fall out of place, how is it that we can see it as a connection with the Lord? So that is really what is being taught in the Bhagavad Gita. Over and over again. You have the right to perform your duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities. Why? Because there's other doers that are there. There's other factors that come into place. And never be attached to not performing your duty. So you have to do it, but you have to do it in a spirit of detachment. And that is a struggle. But once we know that that is a goal, right? When we know that that's a goal, we can think about it. We can contemplate, we can meditate on it. This is healthy meditation. How do I remain Krishna? How do I remain detached in this situation? Result may not come out the way I want to, but I have to remain detached and keep moving, stay steady in my particular activity. That goes against what society tells us. Society tells us to run away, not working, go down another road. You're not working, go down another road. But what are we chasing after? We're chasing after false happiness. So better that we remain engaged and just renounce those activities. Krishna says, if we see this in a way, if we see this connected to him, we can attain perfection in this life. It's a difficult concept to apply, and thus it's much easier just to renounce the activity. But that's not what Krishna is explaining. Do not attack. Don't renounce the activity. Renounce the desire to enjoy the activity. Ultimately, that can be accomplished when one engages in devotional service to the Lord, when one sees all one's activities as service to the Lord.
Thank you so much, Dronacharya. Amazing points. Yeah, I jotted them because I really liked how you phrased that sentence. So thank you so much. It's definitely a thought for me to really meditate on and embrace it. Thank you so much. Any questions from devotees? I just want to give a couple of more minutes before we end. I know we passed. Just want to make sure that I don't ignore anybody. Are there any questions, any comments, any reflection? And I want to also remind devotees that today, on the auspicious day of the appearance of Advaitacharya, we will be starting our Bhagavad Gita circle discussion tonight.
Yeah.
Got inspired by ISKCON Philadelphia with their happy hour. Thank you so much, Dronacharya. It really inspired me for some time, and I'm happy that we could have our own here. So thank you for your inspiration and your encouragement. So we are starting out at 6 to 6:30. It starts at 6 o'clock, and we will send out the Zoom link reminders close to the time, but we encourage devotees to please do join us. And this evening will be Mother Gita, who is online. So please do log on to our first session of Bhagavad Gita Circle. And we're happy that we starting it on the auspicious day of appearance of Advaitacharya. Interestingly, this morning when I was chanting my rounds, I remember that we even started the Bhagavatam classes on Bhadra Purnima in 2020. So it's very auspicious that we are starting the Bhagavad Gita Circle on the appearance of Advaitacharya. So look forward to seeing all the devotees. Until then, have a wonderful day and a wonderful appearance day of Advaitacharya. Let's read about him, meditate on him, little quotes, little clips of his glories would be very nice. And we'll see you all this evening. Until then, Vanchakaptabhyascha, Kripasindhabevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you so much, Dronacharya Prabhu, and thank you for giving us a wonderful climax of this whole verse. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. And all the best in starting this new program.
Thank
Bhagavad
you.
Gita is full of nectar. I mean, that's the book I always go to. And you get to see that all these themes that are there, throughout, especially this section of the Bhagavatam. I mean, Sri Krishna's talking about them in the Bhagavad Gita. Srila Prabhupada writes, so many connections are there, throughout. So anyway.
Thank you. And there Krishna said that it was a wonderful class. Thank you so much, Prabhu, he said.
Hare Krishna. I'm
Thank
sorry, I got caught up there a little bit. I had some notes that I took, and I think I cut and pasted one section in my notes over another section, and so I got mixed up
Dr.
there.
Brett has something. Can you hang on for a minute?
Hare Krishna. That's what I was going to say. Hare Krishna. I didn't know if you had to go. I did have a question though, but if you have the time, yeah, we can do a call later.
Yeah, why don't we, if we can do we can call later. I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
Perfect. Great. I'm
Okay.
glad that
I'll send you a text then, Dronacharya.
Sure.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, devotees. Hari Hari Bol. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother Gita.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.